The world had never seen anything like it. When the news broke about the marriage between a young man from a humble background and a woman whose family was wealthy and influential, it caused an immediate uproar. People whispered in cafes, argued in offices, and shared heated opinions on social media. No one could understand why she, with all the privileges and comforts life could offer, would choose someone so ordinary. And yet she had, and he had accepted without hesitation. The day of the wedding was set, and the anticipation was unbearable. For weeks, the media had speculated about every little detail: the outfits, the guest list, even the menu. The man who had lived a simple life found himself suddenly surrounded by reporters and cameras. He had never wanted attention, and the thought of being under a spotlight made him uneasy. Yet, when he looked at her, standing tall in her elegant dress, he felt a sense of certainty he had never known. This was right. This was real. She had spent countless hours planning every detail of the ceremony, not because she wanted to impress the world, but because she wanted it to be a moment of beauty and love. She had chosen a small, historic venue that overlooked the city's skyline. The hall was filled with delicate flowers and soft pastel shades, and candles flickered gently on every table. Everything was perfect, yet she could feel the tension in the air. People were watching, judging, waiting for something to go wrong. On the morning of the wedding, he walked through the quiet streets, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first time they met, at a local charity event, where she had volunteered to help distribute food to the needy. He had been passing by, simply curious, but their eyes had met, and something unexplainable had sparked between them. She had smiled at him warmly, and in that moment, the noise of the world seemed to fade away. They talked for hours, about simple things at first, about dreams and fears, about books they loved and places they wanted to see. He had never imagined that a single encounter could change the course of his life. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. He admired her courage, how she ignored the whispers of disapproval from her family and society. She admired his honesty and the way he made her feel seen in a world that often valued appearances over truth. Despite the glaring differences in their worlds, they found common ground in small gestures, shared laughter, quiet evenings together, and an understanding that neither of them had ever felt before. But the world did not see the same picture. Headlines screamed across newspapers and news channels, "Shocking marriage of the year." Why she chose him, a union that defies society. People questioned her motives. Some said it was rebellion. Some said it was a foolish mistake. And some, who were far harsher, claimed it was a calculated stunt. He read some of these stories, his stomach twisting with anxiety. How could people be so cruel without even knowing the truth? Yet when he looked at her, her hand in his, he found strength. Their love, however unconventional, was their truth. On the day of the wedding, friends and family arrived, filling the hall with laughter and conversation. She noticed the nervous glances exchanged between her relatives, the way some guests whispered and shook their heads. He felt the weight of expectations pressing down on him, yet he held on to the thought that love was enough. As the ceremony began, she walked down the aisle, her eyes searching for his. When their hands finally met, the murmurs faded into silence. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The vows they exchanged were simple, yet deeply sincere. He promised to stand by her side, to support her dreams, to protect her from harm. She promised to cherish him, to respect him, and to nurture their love through every challenge. No grandiose speeches, no elaborate declarations, just two people expressing the truth of their hearts. As they spoke, some in the audience felt moved, some felt skeptical, and others simply marveled at the courage it took to defy expectations. After the ceremony, the celebration began. There was music, dancing, and an air of joy that seemed to push back against the judgment outside. He watched her laugh with genuine delight. It's a kind of laughter that reaches the eyes and heart, and felt a warmth he had never known. She noticed how awkward he felt among the crowd, yet how he never let it stop him from being present, from being honest. Friends whispered to each other about how different they seemed, how unusual this pairing was, but for him and her. The night was perfect. Despite the celebrations, both of them were aware that this was only the beginning. A marriage like theirs would not go unnoticed. There would be challenges, pressures, and perhaps even heartbreak. They both understood that the world outside their love was harsh and unforgiving, yet they had chosen each other in spite of it. That choice, they believed, was stronger than any criticism or obstacle. As the night drew to a close, they slipped away from the crowd and walked through the quiet gardens outside the hall. The city lights shimmered in the distance, reflecting in their eyes. They spoke in hushed tones about their hopes and fears, about the lives they had left behind and the future they wanted to build together. There was an unspoken understanding between them that love was not always easy, but it was always worth it. The first night of their marriage was a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. They lay side by side, talking until their voices grew hoarse, sharing secrets they had never told anyone else. In those intimate hours, the world outside seemed to vanish. The wealth, the power, the opinions of strangers, they all felt distant and irrelevant. All that mattered was the bond they had forged, the connection that had survived skepticism and judgment. Yet, even in those quiet moments, there was an awareness that life would test them. There would be moments of doubt, disagreements, and pressures that could shake the foundation of their relationship. But they were determined. Determined to face whatever came together, to remain honest with each other, and to hold on to the love that had brought them into this new life. In the days that followed, the media frenzy continued. Photographs of their wedding appeared in every newspaper and magazine. Social media exploded with comments ranging from admiration to ridicule. Yet, through it all, they remained grounded in each other. They understood that while the world could offer praise or criticism, only their own hearts truly mattered. Friends and close relatives who supported them marveled at the courage it took to stand against the tide. Some expressed concern, worried that the pressures of public scrutiny could drive a wedge between them. Others admired the authenticity of their love, seeing it as a beacon of hope in a world often obsessed with appearances. Through it all, the couple focused on the simplicity of their shared life, finding joy in ordinary moments, morning walks, cooking together, late-night conversations, and quiet laughter. And so, the first part of their journey ended with the world watching, judging and questioning, but the couple united in a quiet, steadfast love that refused to be defined by societal expectations. They had chosen each other against all odds, and while the future remained uncertain, their commitment was unwavering. They had survived the shock of the world's scrutiny, and in that survival, they found a strength neither had known before. This was only the beginning of a marriage that shocked the world, a marriage that defied expectations, and a story that would unfold in ways no one could have predicted. But in this first chapter, in these first precious days, they had discovered something timeless and rare, a love that belonged solely to them, and nothing else mattered. Life after the wedding was different from anything either of them had imagined. The initial thrill of the ceremony, the attention, and the excitement slowly gave way to a quieter, more complicated reality. The cameras no longer followed them everywhere, but the whispers, the opinions, and the judgments still lingered in every corner of their lives. The world that had watched them marry so eagerly now waited to see if their love could survive the ordinary trials of life. The first weeks were a strange mixture of joy and unease. In private, they laughed easily, shared meals, and enjoyed the comfort of simply being together. He had never imagined a life of such attention, but her presence made it feel natural. She, on the other hand, reveled in the freedom of having chosen someone outside her familiar world, someone who made her laugh, who saw her as a person rather than an icon or a figure to be admired. They were discovering each other in ways that felt exciting and terrifying all at once. But even as they adjusted to life together, small tensions began to appear. Differences that had seemed charming in the whirlwind of courtship became noticeable in day-to-day life. He was careful and quiet, preferring simple routines and minimal attention. She was accustomed to a fast-paced, opinionated world where decisions were scrutinized and expectations were high. What had once been playful quirks now led to arguments about trivial things. The way the dishes were washed, the way guests were handled, or how time should be spent. These arguments were small, but they hinted at the larger challenges that lay ahead. Family pressures were relentless. She received constant calls and messages, some concerned, some critical, and some outright dismissive of her choice. His family, though supportive in their own quiet way, worried about how he would navigate the new world he had entered. Friends tried to offer advice, but much of it came with judgment or personal bias. Every interaction reminded them both that this marriage was not just between two people. Wu was a story the world had claimed as its own. Public scrutiny was harder than they had expected. Social media erupted whenever the smallest detail of their life together became visible. A photograph of them walking through the park, a casual dinner out, a shared smile, it became fodder for commentary. Some people admired their courage, but many ridiculed them, suggesting the marriage would fail or that their love was a publicity stunt. He tried to ignore it, but the constant barrage of opinions wore on his patience. She was stronger, at least outwardly, but inwardly. The judgment cut just as deeply, amid the stress. They sought comfort in the quiet moments that reminded them why they had chosen each other. Early morning walks became a refuge. Sitting in their small kitchen, sipping tea, and talking about nothing at all, allowed them to reconnect. He loved to listen to her stories about her childhood, about dreams she had forgotten along the way. She enjoyed his perspective on the world, the simple way he noticed things others overlooked. These moments, fleeting as they were, reminded them that their bond was real and worth protecting. Yet cracks continued to show. Money and lifestyle differences, which had seemed inconsequential at first, began to surface in subtle ways. He was cautious with spending, preferring practical solutions over indulgence. Now she was used to a life of choices and luxuries that were now at her fingertips, but no longer automatically available. Disagreements about vacations, household arrangements, and social commitments became common. Both tried to compromise, but compromise felt heavy when neither wanted to lose the comfort of their familiar ways. The couple also had to deal with external challenges. Friends who had initially supported them began expressing doubts, questioning whether the marriage could survive the pressures of reality. Some friends stopped visiting. Others made subtle, cutting remarks about the odds against them. Even well-meaning advice sometimes felt like judgment, and slowly, both realized that the world had not fully accepted their union. They were alone in many ways, relying more and more on each other for reassurance, understanding, and emotional stability. One evening, a particularly tense argument shook them deeply. It started with something smaller disagreement about attending a formal event, but escalated quickly. Voices were raised, old insecurities surfaced, and harsh words were exchanged. For the first time, he wondered if they had made a mistake. She too questioned whether love alone was enough to sustain a life so different from what each had known before. They did not resolve the argument immediately. Instead, they sat in silence, the weight of the world pressing on their shoulders, unsure if the love that had seemed so strong in the bright light of the wedding could survive the darkness of doubt. Despite these challenges, moments of tenderness continued to remind them of the bond they shared. One rainy afternoon, they stayed home instead of attending a high-profile event. He cooked a simple meal while she made tea. They laughed at small mishaps, like spilling flour on the counter or accidentally burning the toast. In that ordinary chaos, they found a sense of intimacy and companionship that no public approval could replicate. It was in these quiet, imperfect moments that they realized the depth of their connection and the reason they had chosen each other in the first place. However, life was not without external pressures. News outlets continued to speculate about their relationship, writing stories about potential cracks in their marriage. Some rumors were baseless, others contained kernels of truth, but all were amplified and sensationalized. They learned quickly that no matter how sincere their love, the world would always look for drama, for scandal, for a story that could be sold to the masses. They tried to shield each other from the worst of it, but inevitably, the media's intrusion seeped into their private life, creating tension and mistrust. In response, they developed strategies to cope. They agreed on boundaries, deciding which events to attend and how to engage with the public. They limited social media exposure, carefully choosing what to share and what to keep private. They leaned on close friends who offered honest advice without judgment. Through these measures, they were able to reclaim some control over their lives. creating spaces where love and authenticity could flourish despite outside pressures. Amid the chaos, they also began to discover hidden strengths within themselves and each other. He learned to navigate situations that required diplomacy and patience, skills he had never needed in his simpler life. She discovered resilience and resourcefulness, realizing that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in the courage to make independent choices. Together, they became more than a couple. They became a team capable of weathering storms that would have torn apart lesser bonds. Yet, the shadow of doubt never fully disappeared. Each small disagreement, each intrusive headline reminded them that the world remained skeptical. Friends whispered warnings, family members expressed concern, and strangers openly criticized their choices. The weight of expectation was heavy, and they sometimes questioned whether love alone could overcome such persistent judgment. Still, they held on to the simple truths that had brought them together: the laughter, the quiet conversations, the shared dreams, and the unwavering support during moments of fear and uncertainty. As the months passed, they began to carve out a rhythm. They balanced social obligations with private life, navigating public scrutiny while nurturing their love. They learned when to fight, when to compromise, and when to simply step back and allow time to heal misunderstandings. In these moments of growth, they discovered that marriage was not just about the excitement of love or the glamour of public attention. It was about persistence, patience, and the willingness to face challenges together. No matter how difficult, the relationship also deepened in ways that surprised both of them. He came to understand her complexities, the vulnerabilities she hid beneath her composed exterior, the insecurities that even wealth and privilege could not erase. She discovered the quiet strength he possessed, patience and loyalty that made him reliable in ways she had never experienced before. Together, they explored emotional depths that had been untouched in their previous lives, learning to communicate honestly even when it was uncomfortable or frightening. Despite these developments, the world remained a constant presence in their lives. Every public appearance, every shared photograph, every minor slip in behavior was analyzed, dissected, and commented upon. They had to learn to navigate this scrutiny with grace, understanding that public opinion could not dictate the reality of their love. In private, they laughed at the absurdity of it all, finding solace in the fact that their bond was not defined by what others thought, but by what they felt for each other. Yet, even as they found moments of peace, new challenges emerged. Old friends from her world questioned the wisdom of her choice, bringing up stories and opinions meant to sow doubt. His friends worried he was losing himself in a world he did not fully understand. Differences in lifestyle, expectations, and values sometimes collided, leading to tense conversations and lingering doubts. It was clear that love alone was not always enough to smooth the rough edges of life's communication. Understanding and empathy were equally essential. By the end of this period, both of them had grown in unexpected ways. He had become more adaptable, more understanding of complexities beyond his previous experience. She had become more grounded, learning that true happiness came from connection rather than approval or status. Together, they had begun to build a life that, while far from perfect, was genuine and uniquely theirs. They had discovered the beauty of imperfection, the strength found in persistence, and the resilience born from facing life's challenges side by side. In these early months, they had also begun to recognize that marriage was a journey, not a destination. It was a constant process of learning, adapting, and growing together. Each challenge, each disagreement, each moment of doubt was an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to better understand each other, and to reaffirm the choice they had made. In a world that watched them with skepticism, they had created a private world of trust, love, and shared purpose. And so, as part 2 of their story unfolded, life became a delicate balance between public scrutiny and private connection, between conflict and compromise, between the weight of expectation and the simplicity of genuine love. They were no longer just the couple who shocked the world. They were two individuals learning to become a team, discovering the resilience, patience, and understanding that true partnership required. Their journey had only just begun, and while challenges loomed on the horizon, they faced them together, ready to navigate the complexities of life, love, and the world's relentless gaze. Life had settled into a rhythm for the couple, but the quiet comfort they had begun to enjoy was not meant to last. As they grew more comfortable with each other, the world around them began to press in with new challenges, hidden truths, and secrets that could no longer be ignored. What had started as joy and laughter was slowly shadowed by the reality that every life, no matter how carefully built, carries burdens that eventually surface. It began subtly. A friend of hers mentioned a distant relative who had expressed doubts about their marriage, hinting at family disputes that had never been shared with her. At first it seemed trivial, a remnant of her family's protective instincts. But soon, small pieces of information began to accumulate. Past misunderstandings, old financial issues, and disagreements that had been buried in silence began to rise to the surface. Each revelation, while minor on its own, started to create an undercurrent of tension. He noticed the change first. She had grown quiet during conversations that had once been filled with laughter. Occasionally she would stare off into space, her mind clearly elsewhere, and when he asked her about it, she would force a smile and brush it off. But he could tell something was troubling her. He tried to approach the topic gently, asking open-ended questions, offering support without judgment, and allowing her the space to speak freely. Slowly, she began to open up, revealing fragments of her past that she had never shared with him before. She spoke of people she had trusted who had betrayed her, of opportunities that had been lost, and of moments when she had felt powerless despite her wealth and status. He listened, not judging, not offering solutions unless she asked, simply allowing her the freedom to express herself. For him, it was both enlightening and unsettling. He had imagined knowing her fully, but now he realized that every person carries layers that are hidden, even from the ones they love most. Meanwhile, the public's interest in their marriage had not waned. Headlines continued to speculate about the stability of their relationship. Some articles hinted at tension, suggesting that the pressures of family, wealth, and society were too great for love to overcome. Rumors spread online about financial disagreements, social snubs, and personal conflicts, each one magnified by eager followers and commentary. At times, they felt as if their entire lives were under a microscope, every minor misstep amplified into drama for the world to consume. One day, a story appeared in a popular news outlet that shocked them both. It was based on anonymous sources, and made claims about disagreements between them, painting a picture of a marriage on the verge of collapse. The details were exaggerated, the accusations misleading, yet the effect was immediate. Friends called to express concern, family members sent cautious messages, and strangers online speculated endlessly. For the first time, they felt the weight of public perception pressing directly on their private lives. They realized that they had to confront the reality that their love alone could not protect them from external forces. They began to talk openly about boundaries, about how they would handle media attention and gossip. They discussed ways to reinforce trust, to communicate clearly, and to avoid letting outside opinions create fractures in their relationship. It was difficult work, requiring patience, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Amid these external pressures, new secrets surfaced from within their own lives. He learned about her past relationships in more depth, discovering stories she had never shared, experiences that shaped her in ways he had not understood. She, in turn, discovered aspects of his life that he had never revealed. Struggles with self-doubt, moments of failure, and decisions made out of fear rather than confidence. Each revelation was a test of their commitment. Sometimes these discoveries led to arguments, moments of frustration, and feelings of vulnerability that neither had anticipated. Despite the challenges, these moments of truth also strengthened them. They learned to forgive each other, to listen without judgment, and to provide support in ways that were meaningful and genuine. He realized that her past did not define her. Just as she understood that his struggles did not diminish his worth, together they began to build a deeper trust, one forged not in moments of ease, but in moments of honesty, confrontation, and mutual respect. The pressure of external judgment did not lessen. Invitations to social events, requests for interviews, and casual comments in public became opportunities for scrutiny. Every decision, from where they dined to how they spent weekends seemed to be interpreted as a statement about their relationship. They learned to navigate these situations with careful thought, sometimes choosing to engage with the world, other times retreating into the privacy of their home to preserve the intimacy they had cultivated. A particularly difficult period came when a close friend, someone they had trusted for years, unintentionally revealed personal information to the media. The friend meant no harm, yet the leak caused widespread speculation and intense scrutiny. They were forced to address the rumors publicly, clarify misunderstandings, and protect each other from the fallout. This experience was exhausting, testing their patience and their ability to rely on one another. Through it all, they discovered a resilience they had not known existed. Amid the turmoil, they also found moments of unexpected joy. Simple pleasures became profoundly meaningful. Walks in the park, quiet evenings with no interruptions, cooking together, and sharing small, unremarkable experiences that reminded them why they had chosen each other. These moments were fleeting, but they served as a grounding force, providing stability and comfort amid the chaos. They came to understand that happiness was not found in perfection or public approval, but in the quiet, consistent presence of one another. The couple also began to recognize the impact of their choices on their wider lives. They understood that every action, every decision carried consequences, not just for themselves, but for friends, family, and even strangers who followed their story closely. They became more mindful, deliberate, and intentional in how they lived, learning to balance personal desires with responsibility and empathy. This awareness deepened their connection, highlighting the shared values that had drawn them together from the beginning. Despite the growth, tension remained. Occasionally, past disagreements resurfaced, triggered by minor incidents or misunderstandings. Arguments flared and old insecurities emerged. They had to learn not just to react, but to pause, reflect, and communicate. Each conflict, while uncomfortable, became an opportunity to refine their understanding of each other and to reinforce their commitment. Slowly, they built a framework for navigating disagreements, a mixture of patience, honesty, and compassion that allowed them to move forward without leaving scars. As time went on, they also began to address the broader expectations of their families. She spoke honestly with her relatives, explaining her choices, sharing her feelings, and asserting the importance of their relationship. He, too, engaged with his family, navigating the unfamiliar dynamics of wealth, influence, and societal expectation. These conversations were not always easy. At times they faced resistance, skepticism, or outright criticism. But by approaching these challenges together, they demonstrated strength, unity, and the ability to stand firm without alienating those they loved. Then came a moment that would test the couple in ways they had never anticipated. A long-hidden family dispute surfaced, revealing financial irregularities, disagreements over inheritance, and conflicting expectations that had been simmering for years. The revelation was sudden, and the intensity of emotion it provoked was overwhelming. Both were forced to confront not only external pressures, but also internal questions about trust, loyalty, and fairness. During this crisis, they relied on each other more than ever. Long discussions stretched into the early hours of the morning, tears were shed, and fears were voiced openly. Yet, through this, they discovered the true strength of their partnership. They learned that facing adversity together, with honesty and empathy, could transform fear into resilience. By supporting one another and acknowledging each person's perspective, they emerged with a deeper understanding and a renewed commitment to their marriage. Even with these lessons, the couple realized that life would continue to present unforeseen challenges. The world around them remained unpredictable, filled with gossip, speculation, and occasional hostility. They understood that there would always be moments of doubt, external pressure, and private struggle. Yet they also recognized that the foundation they were building, trust, communication, and shared values, could endure almost anything. In these months, they discovered something crucial, that love alone was not enough to sustain a relationship. But love combined with honesty, patience, and mutual respect could withstand even the harshest storms. They also realized that public perception, while influential, could never define their reality. Their life together was theirs alone, shaped by choices, compromises, and shared experiences that no outsider could fully understand. By the end of this chapter, they had weathered scandals, confronted secrets, and navigated complex family dynamics. Each challenge had left its mark, but each had also reinforced their bond. They had learned to listen, to forgive, to communicate, and to act with empathy. They had discovered the importance of maintaining private sanctuaries within a world eager to intrude. And most importantly, they had begun to understand that their journey was uniquely theirs, defined not by public opinion, but by the depth of their commitment to each other. As part 3 of their story closed, the couple stood together, facing a world that continued to question, judge, and speculate. They knew that more challenges awaited, more secrets might surface, and more difficult decisions would be required. Yet they also understood that they had survived trials that could have destroyed lesser relationships. Their marriage, once shocking to the world, had begun to prove itself resilient, forged not only in love, but in the fire of honesty, patience, and shared struggle. And so, while the world remained fascinated, skeptical, and at times harsh, the couple continued to build a life together, one that was real, flawed, challenging, and deeply human. They had learned that life was rarely perfect, that love was never simple, and that the strength of a relationship could only be measured by the depth of commitment and the courage to face every obstacle together. In this understanding, they found both hope and determination, ready to confront whatever lay ahead, knowing that they were stronger as a unit than they could ever be alone. The months had been long and demanding, filled with a mixture of laughter, quiet understanding, and tension that had been slowly building beneath the surface. The couple had grown closer in many ways, learning to navigate their differences, to communicate honestly, and to protect the fragile intimacy they shared. Yet, life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and it was clear that their journey was approaching a moment of reckoning. It began with small disagreements that escalated faster than either of them expected. Where previously they could compromise, now even minor issues seemed to ignite frustration. The differences in their daily routines, the lingering pressures from family, and the constant scrutiny of the public eye combined to create a sense of unease. Neither had anticipated how exhausting it would be to constantly balance their private happiness with the expectations of everyone else. One evening, a disagreement about attending a social gathering turned into a heated argument. He wanted to skip the event, preferring a quiet night at home. She insisted they attend, believing it was important to maintain appearances and honor obligations. Voices were raised, accusations were made, and old insecurities surfaced. In that moment, it felt as if every unresolved tension from the past months had erupted at once. The argument continued late into the night. Words were spoken that neither of them intended, yet the intensity of emotion made it almost impossible to stop. He questioned her priorities, wondering if her attachment to social appearances overshadowed their shared life. She questioned his willingness to engage, worrying that he was retreating from responsibilities and commitment. For the first time, they both felt an unfamiliar fear, the fear that love alone might not be enough to bridge the growing divide between them. After hours of tension, they retreated to separate rooms, each lost in their own thoughts. He reflected on the challenges of adjusting to a life that was so different from what he had known, the constant judgment and the expectations that felt impossible to meet. She reflected on the strain of balancing her public and private worlds, the pressure to maintain dignity while managing a relationship that defied expectations. Both were exhausted, yet both knew that ignoring the problem would only allow it to grow. The following days were tense. Conversations were short, smiles were forced, and silence became a frequent companion. Friends noticed the change, some offering advice, others simply observing quietly. The couple realized that they needed to confront the issues openly, without letting pride or fear dictate their responses. They began to talk, slowly and carefully, about the patterns that had formed, the misunderstandings that had grown, and the expectations that felt impossible to reconcile. During these discussions, new challenges emerged. Past grievances, once ignored or forgotten, were now resurfacing. He brought up moments where he had felt unappreciated, overlooked, or misunderstood. She spoke of times when she had felt unsupported, judged, or constrained by the weight of his opinions. Each revelation was painful, forcing them to confront aspects of their relationship that neither had fully understood. Yet these conversations, while uncomfortable, were necessary. They realized that to move forward, they needed to acknowledge their mistakes, their assumptions, and their unspoken fears. External pressures continued to complicate matters. The media, which had once been fascinated by the novelty of their marriage, now speculated on the cracks that were forming. Headlines hinted at conflicts, suggested separation, and questioned the viability of a relationship that had always been unconventional. Social media buzzed with opinions, many of them harsh, some of them cruel. Friends and acquaintances, while well-meaning, sometimes offered advice that undermined their confidence. It felt as though the entire world was testing their bond. Eager to see it falter under strain, amid this turmoil, a personal crisis emerged. A distant family member, previously unknown to the public, appeared unexpectedly, bringing with them accusations and demands that neither had anticipated. Financial disagreements, personal grievances, and misunderstandings were laid bare in ways that threatened to destabilize their lives. The couple was forced to confront not only the external pressure of this intrusion, but also their own vulnerabilities, the fears, insecurities, and doubts that had been quietly simmering. They spent long nights discussing how to handle the situation. Every decision seemed critical, every action potentially consequential. They weighed the impact of confrontation versus compromise, public response versus private resolution. The tension was suffocating, and yet they knew that facing the challenge together was the only path forward. They began to strategize, carefully planning each step, each conversation, each response, while reminding themselves of the trust that had brought them together. Despite the intensity of these challenges, there were moments of hope. In quiet conversations, they reaffirmed their commitment to one another. They found solace in small acts of kindness, a gentle touch, a shared meal, a quiet laugh at an absurd situation. These moments, though fleeting, reminded them of the foundation of their love, the bond that had carried them through months of public scrutiny, private tension, and personal struggles. Yet, the weight of accumulated stress was undeniable. The combination of external pressures and internal conflicts began to take a toll on their emotional well-being. Sleep was restless, moods were fragile, and patience was thin. Both felt the strain, recognizing that the choices they made in the coming days could have lasting consequences. They realized that the comfort of routine, the joy of small moments, and the intimacy they had built could not shield them from the reality of life's challenges. A turning point came when they attended a formal event together. The room was filled with observers, each judging, each expecting, each waiting for a sign of weakness. They felt exposed, vulnerable, and acutely aware of the public eye upon them. A casual comment from a guest, meant to be playful, triggered an argument in private, which in turn was noticed by onlookers. Though nothing was said aloud, the tension was palpable. They left the event early, retreating to the privacy of their home, where the weight of emotion could finally be expressed without audience or judgment. In the days that followed, they faced difficult choices. Should they step back from public life to protect their relationship? Should they continue to engage, risking further scrutiny and potential misunderstanding? Every option carried uncertainty, and every decision demanded courage. They realized that the coming weeks would define the future of their marriage not in dramatic gestures, but in the consistent, deliberate choices they made together. The breaking point arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, during an ordinary evening at home. A disagreement, seemingly minor on the surface, became the catalyst for a confrontation that neither could avoid. Voices were raised, feelings were hurt, and frustrations that had accumulated over months boiled to the surface. Each felt misunderstood, each felt unsupported, and each questioned whether the effort to maintain their relationship was worth the pain it sometimes caused. In that moment, The fear of failure loomed larger than love. They sat across from each other, exhausted and tearful, aware that the decisions made in the coming hours could change everything. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive, as they both struggled to find the words to express the depth of their emotions. It was a rare and vulnerable moment, a moment in which the world outside ceased to exist, leaving only the raw, unfiltered reality of two people trying to navigate love, fear, and doubt. Yet, even in the midst of conflict, there was clarity. They recognized that their marriage had survived challenges that would have destroyed lesser relationships. They remembered the moments of joy, the nights spent laughing, the quiet mornings sharing tea, the whispered conversations in the dark. These memories, though fragile, provided a lifeline, a reminder of why they had chosen each other against all odds. They began to talk. Slowly, carefully, with honesty, and without accusation. Each expressed their fears, their disappointments, and their hopes. Each listened, not to respond, but to understand. It was painful, exhausting, and at times emotionally overwhelming, yet it was necessary. Through this process, they discovered a renewed sense of connection, a shared understanding that their love was not fragile, but resilient, capable of withstanding even the most difficult trials. However, the resolution was not immediate. They both understood that the world outside was still watching, still judging, still waiting for signs of weakness. The couple knew that public perception could never be fully controlled, and that at times it could feel oppressive. Yet they also recognized that the opinions of others, no matter how loud or persistent, could not dictate the truth of their bond. Their focus shifted inward, toward one another, toward the choices that would define the next stage of their lives. As the days passed, they developed strategies to maintain equilibrium. They set boundaries with friends and family, clarified expectations, and reinforced the importance of private communication. They established rituals that allowed them to reconnect daily, whether through small gestures, shared meals, or quiet conversations. They learned to manage external pressures without allowing them to dictate their emotions, maintaining a delicate balance between public life and private sanctuary. Yet, as they worked to rebuild stability, a new element emerged, a situation neither could have foreseen. A letter arrived, unexpected and mysterious, containing information that hinted at long-buried family conflicts and secrets that could potentially upend everything they had worked to stabilize. The contents were ambiguous but alarming, creating a sense of urgency and uncertainty. For the first time in months, both felt a creeping fear that the stability they had fought to maintain might be shattered in an instant. They faced a choice: ignore the letter and hope that the issues it hinted at would fade, or confront the uncertainty directly, risking conflict but gaining clarity. After long discussion, they decided that facing the challenge together was the only option. They knew that avoidance would only allow fear and speculation to grow, while confronting the unknown, though frightening, offered the possibility of resolution, understanding, and strength. In the final hours of Part 4, they prepared for this confrontation. Hearts were heavy, but determination was strong. They knew that the next steps could redefine their relationship, testing the limits of trust, love, and courage. The world outside remained unaware, watching, judging, and speculating. Yet within the walls of their home, two people stood together, facing uncertainty hand in hand. This moment marked the turning point of their story. It was a delicate, tense, and pivotal point, the threshold between fear and clarity, between doubt and understanding, between the struggles of the past months and the decisions that would shape the future. They understood that life could be unpredictable, that love could be challenged, and that choices made in courage could define the path forward. And so, as Part 4 closed, the couple stood together, ready to confront the unknown, aware of the risks, and determined to navigate the storm side by side. The world might have anticipated failure, but within the quiet of their shared resolve, they had discovered a new strength. The breaking point had arrived, but so had the possibility of transformation. And the story of their marriage was far from over. The days following the arrival of the mysterious letter were tense, filled with a mixture of anxiety, anticipation, and the faint hope that clarity would come. The couple had faced challenges before, but this felt different. It was not just a disagreement or a public rumor, it was something deeply personal. Reaching into the past and threatening the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build, they spent hours preparing, reviewing details, and discussing how to approach the situation. They reminded each other of the journey they had already endured, the months of scrutiny, the arguments, the media speculation, and the secrets that had surfaced. In those moments, they realized that the strength they had gained was not just in love, but in resilience, in the shared understanding that they could face anything together. Finally, the day arrived when they would confront the uncertainty. With cautious steps, they met the person who had sent the letter, a relative from her side whose intentions were unclear. The meeting was tense, filled with hesitation, carefully chosen words, and subtle gestures of evaluation. They listened, asked questions, and observed. Trying to understand the motivations and truths behind the claims, what they discovered was startling. The letter had hinted at disputes and conflicts, but the reality was more complicated than anyone had imagined. Old grievances, financial misunderstandings, and unresolved family tensions were intertwined with personal perceptions and miscommunications. It was not a straightforward threat, but a web of history that had been left unaddressed for years. As they unraveled it, both felt a mix of relief, disbelief, and exhaustion. In that moment, they understood that the challenges were not about them as a couple, but about the patterns of the past that had persisted long before they met. The realization was sobering. Their love had survived scrutiny, public opinion, and personal doubts, yet some battles were not theirs alone. They could face them, but only by acknowledging history, setting boundaries, committing to honesty in ways they had not anticipated. Together, they devised a plan. They would address the concerns respectfully, communicate openly, and protect the integrity of their private lives. They agreed on limits, on what was necessary to resolve, and what could be left behind. This required courage, patience, and the ability to separate emotion from judgment. Each step was deliberate, ensuring that they acted as a team, presenting a united front, even in uncertainty. As they navigated the situation, a surprising shift occurred. The relative, initially rigid and defensive, began to respond with a degree of understanding. Through conversation and openness, they discovered that assumptions and miscommunications had fueled much of the tension. By the end of the encounter, there was a tentative reconciliation. Not perfect, but a start toward understanding. For the couple, this was both unexpected and relieving, a resolution that felt like a gift after months of strain. With the external pressures temporarily eased, they turned inward, reflecting on their journey. They revisited the moments of joy and struggle, the small gestures of love, the arguments that had shaped them, and the public scrutiny that had tested their patience. They realized that each experience, no matter how painful or challenging, had contributed to a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Their bond had been forged not only in love, but in perseverance, trust, and shared resilience. Even with this sense of relief, they recognized that life would continue to bring challenges. There would be moments of doubt, external pressures, and personal struggles. Yet, they also understood that the foundation they had built, communication, empathy, and shared values, was strong enough to withstand future storms. This awareness brought a sense of peace, a quiet confidence in their ability to navigate whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, they focused on rebuilding routines that brought stability and happiness. They prioritized time together, nurturing their connection with small, meaningful rituals, shared meals, evening walks, and quiet conversations that allowed them to express thoughts and feelings without interruption. These practices reinforced the intimacy and trust they had fought to preserve, creating a sanctuary within the chaos of the outside world as they re-established normalcy. The public remained curious, though their interest had shifted. Stories of conflict gave way to speculation about the couple's next moves, their plans, and their life together. The couple learned to navigate this attention without allowing it to dictate their actions. They understood that public opinion could never define the authenticity of their relationship and chose to focus on what mattered: their own understanding, happiness, and shared life. Unexpectedly, another challenge arose, not from family or media, but from within themselves. Each began to confront personal fears and insecurities that had lingered unnoticed. He struggled with moments of self-doubt, questioning whether he could truly meet the expectations of someone from a different world. She wrestled with the fear of losing independence or identity, concerned that love might require a compromise she was unprepared to make. These internal conflicts were subtle but powerful, threatening to undermine the peace they had recently achieved.